Hey, everybody. So, this month's journal is going to be focused some on medications, drugs, things that people might take in order to. Hmm, well, this is where it's really important before we start thinking, putting something into someone, whether it's us or someone else. When you put it in here, once it's in, there are a number of things that could and do happen. And so immediately thinking, oh, something's wrong. Let's use a drug or a medication to treat it. In some cases, that might be exactly a fantastic answer. But in many other cases, we need to hit the pause button a lot sooner and go, okay, so something's changed. There's something different here. And that something different could be something related to number one, the six pieces of the puzzle, rather than it's the person and what's happening inside the person that is the problem. So if we could address the problem inside the person, then none of this would be happening. And it's a great example for me of the latest ad on a particular drug, Rexulti, that says, that's just their dementia. So that's all agitation related to their dementia. It's like, whoa, 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 heavens to Betsy. That was never the intent of the assessment tool that was used to determine whether or not it did indeed reduce agitation. So let's back up again and let's say, okay, so what are the six pieces of the puzzle for everybody? Just to review, okay, three of the pieces, yeah, we're noticing a change. So it could be that the change is happening, the person is actually changing. Something about the person is changing. Or could it be a reemergence of something from before? So it's a pattern. This is something that happens episodically. This is something that isn't exactly new. It's something that's happened before. And because it's happened before, we may think, oh, yeah. And so this happened before. So this is, we gave them the med, we put the med in and it stopped. Now, like I said, sometimes great, it's the right answer. But sometimes what happened before and what's happening now are subtly different, or it's a combination. Because the other pieces of the puzzle that could be changing, it could be the brain change. It could be anxiety, depression. It could be dementia. It could be they've got a second dementia. It could be that dementia is progressing. It could be, it could be instead a delirium. It could be something acutely wrong. Or what we think is acutely wrong is not. It's the dementia. And so trying to increase the medication to manage the delirium actually, well, it could be both, or maybe it's all three: anxiety, depression, and dementia. Maybe it's anxiety, delirium, and dementia. Maybe I think you're getting the idea here. So if that's the case, then putting a med in the middle of it might change one of those factors, but it might impact the other factor. And at times that may be exactly the right answer, but sometimes with dementia, it's not the right answer. It actually can make things harder to figure out, particularly depending on the medication we choose to use. So, for instance, with a drug that affects the entire central nervous system in a way that puts it under control, it actually eliminates a lot of clues and cues that might help us figure out what else is going on. Do we want to throw a break here? Do we want to actually put a full stop here? Or do we want to take a few seconds to figure things out? Now, this other thing involved in here is the person's sensory well-being, physical well-being, mental health well-being in general. So looking at fuel intake, fluid intake for that person, has some of that shifted, or are they taking their meds accurately? Could it be not that we need another med, but we need to look at how the meds are interacting? Could it be that the person's on a lot of meds and they've been on these meds for a good long, some of them for like over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Because when we're talking about people who might be on the older scale, indeed, they might have been on medications quite some time. And it could simply be that their bodies are changing. between their dementia, their aging process, and their chronic health issues, that now those meds are acting or interacting in more challenging and dangerous ways. Or maybe the med they were put on ages ago have been added to a list that for older adults, bad idea. And that list is called the Beers list. And if you're not familiar with it, maybe a geriatric pharmacist or a pharmacist who's really familiar with best practice when it comes to geriatrics. And most physicians or nurse practitioners or physician extenders might also be familiar, but they might get in a hurry, or there might be multiple providers. We know that when the more providers we have, the higher the risk. So let's pause again and go, okay, so just with noticing a change, we've got different variables we should be looking at. Could it be a case of eyesight is changing, or could it be a case of the dementia is changing my ability to use my eyes effectively? In which case, using medications in my eye to do something with my eye or doing something with my eye may not, well, maybe I do need new glasses. Maybe my glaucoma does need managed differently. But with my added brain change of dementia, maybe we need to look at how we're delivering it, not if we're delivering it. And maybe we need to look at the medication itself. And is there an alternative to doing it the way we're doing it? So it's not more medication, it might be varying how the medication is delivered, or if the medication is delivered via the method that we were talking about or something else. So this whole idea of really adjusting this stuff, we want to be cognizant of it, but we want to be thoughtful, taking away, adding on. But we are way too likely in our current mode to add something in rather than really look hard and say, let's see what we can get rid of. And if we do that, we want to be real thoughtful about that. But see, before we get there, we need to get better at looking at, okay, so let's take a look at who's around the person and what the skill set of those individuals are. Has there been a change in who's there, in what the people are asking and able to support doing? Could it be that they need greater training? Could it be they need greater awareness? Oh, so we're talking about stakeholders. Who else involved in this? And what's the goal of the stakeholder and the story of the stakeholder compared to the individual and their practices? And then we want to start looking at the environment. And when we talk about environment, you guys know we talk about a lot of things. So is something in the environment shifting? And we could look at 4Fs and the 4Ss. We can also look at place, people, props, programming, and other possibilities. But we want to look at the environment as a variable, because if the thing we're trying to manage with medications could be better managed by an environmental modification, the environmental modification, possibly combined with the person modification, might actually be easier to manage rather than looking for the magic medication, because the medication, once it goes in, we don't have as much control over what it might be doing inside the person. Now, the third element here, and sometimes over here, fluid and fuel might be the issue. It's absolutely accurate. But in the environment, how are they getting the fuel in the fluid? Could it be an environmental access issue? Could it be a challenge with how many variables we have on the fluids and the fuel? Could it be how often it, well, now we get to the third, which is how is time used? What's going on? What's the timing? How are people spending some time? Is part of why the agitation is happening, because there's not enough sense of value and purpose. There's not enough enjoyment in being alive. There's not enough true self-care going on for one or more of us. Or could it be that, this one, let's see, rest and restoration. Are we getting what we need? So looking at the puzzle pieces, when we talk about medications, doing a more careful and thorough job of investigating the 6 pieces of the puzzle. Now, we do need to do this in a timely manner because of the delirium, depression, dementia, agitation, anxiety kinds of things that might be going on. And just keeping in mind, brain changes might be going on for more than one person. So, one of the things we want to think about when we're going into a medical setting or into a medical appointment is what kind of info, what kind of data could we bring in, and how can we frame it so that we're giving accurate information that is helpful and not too directive. But at the same time, we know how to call a pause. So, one of the things we might think about is a medication log where we keep track of all the medications that are being used, how often they're being used, if they're used episodically. And it would include things that are called over the counter meds and topical things and things that we use that we think of as natural or home remedies. I mean, if we're using them for a particular purpose and we're using them consistently, is the consistency changing? So, for instance, things like prune juice could be really helpful when somebody's having trouble getting things through their gut for some people. And letting somebody know, oh, we're already doing X, this regime would be super helpful. So, things that we're doing in a medication log and be sort of aware that, do we know? Is that actually what's happening, or is that what we put in place? But how accurate is that for actually putting it in? Combined with the medication log, truly, I believe, should be a fuel and fluid sort of intake report. How's that going? And on the other side, the output. Because when we put stuff in, stuff coming out, we want to look at the human needs. What do humans need? And if we look at needs, in, out, energy use, now there's another log, and it would be called the activity log. And then, of course, people want to have the favorite. And yeah, I get it. How many episodes of a behavior? If we're going to look at a behavior, let's be thoughtful and let's take a step back. And how many times, maybe to record it, we would say, how many times do I find myself being surprised, distressed, woken up? How many times am I being interrupted? How many times are we repeating a conversation? We repeating a conversation. How many times am I finding that what's happening is happening? So if I could get it to be less, how many times do they, and how many times do we find ourselves? So describing a situation that you're in, and if it's changing either in frequency, intensity, or volume, then we want to get curious about it. And so looking at an activity log, how are people spending their time, and the number of challenging situations we've encountered, who's involved in those, where are they happening? Well, you start to get the flavor of it. Sometimes I think we look for the magic medication when we haven't really done our homework. Now, we don't want to take a long time doing a homework puzzle if this is a fairly rapid onset change, because we want to try to get to the root of the change and modify something. And that modification might be looking for, ooh, is there something going on inside the system that needs to be addressed? And is that potentially dehydration or food poisoning, or could it be malnutrition, or could it be electrolyte imbalance, or could it be? And this is where getting somebody who's knowledgeable involved can be helpful, but we don't want to just hand things over. We still want to stay actively engaged, because our goal is not to just get the magic, but make sure that everything else is staying balanced. And keeping in mind, sometimes making a medication change in one area could really impact some of these other areas. And looking at, as my friend Melanie says, for every plus, there might be a minus. And we're weighing the pluses and the minuses, plus we're weighing the outcome. What actually happened with that med? Is the outcome worth the cost? Did it do what we were hoping it would do? How long will it take to do what we were hoping it would do? What if it's doing about 25% of what we were hoping it would do? Is that enough for what are considered side effects, interactions, negative impact? The reality is I don't have all the answers, but I think one of the tricky parts in what we do is to be clear that this is not the ultimate answer. This is a piece of the puzzle. And if we immediately look at this as the answer, we don't really look at all the variables that make up this very complicated puzzle of helping someone live with dementia. And when I say someone, I mean all of us living with dementia. If we just want something to make it stop, the only thing that makes dementia stop is when someone quits living. So, what do we have to learn to live around, live with? What kind of changes are just changes that are our new typical? And what changes are ones that we do have the opportunity to improve? And let's get really careful so that when we do use a medication, we are using it so carefully, not too carefully, but so carefully that we've really got enough of what we're looking for with as little as the negative, that we aren't doing huge risk taking in an area where we think we're safety seeking. Not pro, not con, just cautious. Been around too many situations where medications get thrown into the mix without a careful evaluation of the value of the medicine versus the value of learning some skills and using them, the value of modifying a setup in a bathroom and using that, the modification of changing how I frame something or when I do something or who's involved. And I'm not sure the risk is worth it in many cases, but that's my perspective. So that's my message for January. There are a lot of medications being thrown around out there. I'm concerned that people are looking for quick fix answers without being thoughtful and careful about potential side effects, impacts, lack of effect, and negative effects. So there you go. Hopefully, looking at 6 pieces of the puzzle, looking at your pause. Oh, yeah, if a medication is making a difference, celebrate, but then don't sit back. Keep track of that activity, keep track of those challenges to make sure we don't miss it until it becomes dangerous. It's all interconnected. Okay, that's the message and the idea, and maybe there's something in there for you. I'm not sure, but what I do know is we can do a lot that can make a big difference. And it's not all in something that you put in someone. It's what we do with one another to move it forward. But sometimes that may involve helping one person and another person figure out the right amount in the right way. Or maybe it's going to take 3 different people to do that. Just a thought.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to help us spread Teeps's positive approach message around the world. And don't forget to click the bell to get notified when new videos are posted.